Okay, final lesson for factorization. So let's see what we are dealing here. So right now, I want to factorize a quadratic equation, which is something you see over here, or a difference of square, which is something you see over here, to find the value of x. Now, I believe by now you should be familiarized factorizing all this kind of expression already. But okay, so when we want to factorize all this expression right now, we are interested to find what's the value of x right now. Okay, but before we do that, there is one key things we need to know, which is this zero here. All right, so right now, before we factorize to find what are the possible value of x, all right, to satisfy this equation must set at 0 over here. Okay, I will tell you why in a while. All right, but before that, let's see what's going to happen and what are some value of x that will satisfy this equation. Okay, now by now you should be able to see that this is a difference of square. All right, if we were to factorize this, we should get something like this. Okay, I will have two brackets that's equal to 0 over here. One of them is plus, one of them is minus, and I should have x, and over here I should have 2 and 2. Right? Okay? And after I'm done with that, okay, after I'm done factorizing with this, I want to find my value of x. So what I'm going to do here is very simple. I'm going to say this is my first bracket and this is my second bracket, and this is what you are going to do. So you're going to have x plus 2, all right? Let me change blue color. So you're going to have x plus 2, which is this bracket here, that's going to equals to 0, or x minus 2, which is the second bracket here, which is also equals to 0, all right? So can you see what I do over here? I will just take the first bracket equals to 0, second bracket equals to 0, all right? I will tell you why is it important you must get 0 in a while, okay? But for now, let's just understand how do we get the value of x. So of course, over here, we can just solve this with our very simple algebra skills. So to x over here, if you move it to the other side, you will get negative 2, or x over here will be positive 2. So in another word, to satisfy this equation, all right, this value of x can be either negative 2 or 2. All right, we can also test this out to see if this is true or not. All right, let's check very quickly. Negative 2 square. Anything negative you square, you will always get positive, right? So that will be 4, and true enough, 4 minus 4 will give you 0, right? So what about if it's a positive one? So 2 square, that will give me 4, and 4 minus 4 is true enough, will give me 0. So there are two values of x that satisfy this equation over here. All right? So same thing, difference of square, quadratic equation, same thing. We can also factorize this out, all right? So let's just quickly factorize this. So what do I have over here? All right, what do I have over here? Okay, x, and this guy will be 7 and 3, all right? So I will make my table, okay? And over here, I will cross multiply. I will get 7x, I will get 3x. That should give me 10x, which is true enough. This is true, okay? So if I have factorized this, my answer here is going to be x plus 7 and x plus 3. Correct or not? Okay? So don't forget your 0 here because we are now dealing with an equation. Alright? Okay? So what do I have over here? This is my first bracket, my second bracket. So I will say my first bracket, x plus 7, that's going to equals to 0. Or x plus, oops, sorry, wrong color. Or I would say x plus 3, that's going to equals to 0. So what are my value of x that will satisfy this equation? So that's going to be x equals to -7 or x is equals to -3. Okay? Alright? And we can again check all these things very, very quickly. Alright? Let me just grab my calculator real fast. Okay? -7 square. Alright? That will give me 49. Right? Okay? 10 multiplied by -7, that will give me -70 and plus 21. And true enough, alright, and true enough, that will give me 0. Okay? So what about -3? Because based on this calculation, this will give me 0 as well. Let's check very quickly. -3 squared, that will give me 9. Okay? 10 multiplied with -3, that will give me -30 now. And plus 21, and true enough, that will give me 0. Okay? So this is how we find the value of x that will satisfy this equation. Okay? But now, some of you may be wondering when you look at this, do you feel weird? Why do you get two values of x over here? Where does it come from? Correct or not? Now, before I explain all these things, let's backtrack to something else, okay? Let's backtrack to something else, okay? Now, actually now before I explain more on this, let's backtrack to something else. This thing over here, this equation over here, has something to do with graphs. Because eventually, when you look at all this expression, you must able to see all this expression, these quadratic equations over here as graph. In that way, you will understand better why are there two values over here. Okay, but before that, because since I talk about graph, let's go back to the most simplest graph, a linear graph. Alright? A linear graph. I'm gonna, draw a line. And I want to do a linear graph over here. Linear graph. Basically, linear graph means a graph with a straight line. So in a linear graph, I believe you are all familiar with this term, which is y equals to mx plus c. Alright? Okay? So let me just draw a simple linear graph for you. Okay? So I have my y-axis and my x-axis here. Let me draw my line perfectly. Okay? So again, this is my x and y axis, okay? So let's just say I have a line that looks something like this, a straight line that cuts through like this. And for example's sake, I'm going to call this line, the name of this line is going to be y equals to 2x plus 4, alright? Let's just say, for example, it's like that, okay? Now, based on your previous knowledge on straight line graph, you might recognize this C called as y-intercept. Correct? Which means where this blue line cuts the y-axis. So this 4 over here is telling you the coordinate of this line over here. Alright? So in this case, we know that this is going to be 0 and 4. Correct or not? The first one is always the x-axis, the second one is always the y-axis. Alright? Now, when we want to find y-intercept, okay, like I show you over here, the x-axis must be 0. Correct or not? That's how we find the y-intercept. There's no x value over here because x is always 0 when we want to find the y-intercept. So that's why over here, if I want to find the y-intercept, x is going to be 0, right? So it's going to look something like this. And true enough, 2 times 0, it's 0. And 4, that's why this is the y-intercept over here. Okay? But this should be true if I'm interested to find the x-intercept, correct? This should be true when I want to find the x-intercept. What's my x-intercept? It's where the line cuts through the y-axis over here. Alright? So if I want to find x-intercept, what does it mean over here? My y-axis, my y has to be always 0 to find the x-intercept. So over here, if I want to find my x-intercept, I will tell you how this is related to this in a while. Just bear with me for a while, okay? So x-intercept over here, y is equals to 0. My equation is y equals to 2x plus 4. To find my x-intercept, my y has to be 0. And then I have 2x plus 4. And I can quickly solve this. And I should get my x is equals to negative 2. And true enough, over here, this is negative 2. And my y is 0. Okay? Now, why am I showing you this and how do I want to relate this with this? So again, actually, what are we looking at this? This is a linear equation. This is a quadratic equation. When you look at a quadratic equation, eventually, you will look through this as a graph, okay? And why are we interested to find the value of x over here? Because what we are looking for is the x-intercept. And to find the x-intercept over here, our value of this y must be 0. That's why we have a 0 over here, because we can rewrite this equation of this line as x squared minus 4 equals y. Alright, that is the equation of the graph. Okay, so to find the y x-intercept, this y has to be 0. That's why for us to find the value of x, we always say the equation must equals to 0. So I hope that's clarified why this have to be 0. But to help you understand even better, I'm going to just sketch out how does this graph look like. Now when we talk about this graph, we call this a quadratic graph, or another word, we call this a parabola graph. Alright, so basically for me, how I remember it, it looks like a smiling face, alright? Okay, it looks like a smiling face, okay? So this guy over here, for example's sake, I'm not going to go in depth on parabola graph. I will go in depth on graph in my future videos, but not here first, okay? So basically, if I want to sketch out this graph, for this particular graph, it will look something like this over here. Okay, it will look something like this over here. This is what we call a parabola graph or a quadratic graph. Okay, so like in this straight line graph, can you see how many times the line cuts through the x-axis? It's only one time, right? But if you look at this line, how many times it cuts through the x-axis? We can see here it cuts through one time and it cuts through one time. That is why when you factorize this, there are two x values that satisfy this equation, because the line cuts through the x-axis two times. One of them over here is actually negative 2 and one of them over here is actually 2. Can you see that? So if I want to write the coordinate, it should look something like this. That is why, okay, that is why there are two x value over here, all right? And I can say the same for this particular graph over here. I can say the same for this particular graph over here. So this graph will slightly look different than this a bit, but the shape is going to be the same, okay? So this graph, if I would like to quickly just sketch it out, this is going to be my x-axis, my y-axis. So if I want to, okay, if you see over here, the curved line, the U-shaped line or the smiley face line cuts through the x-axis at negative 7 and negative 3. So this graph actually looks something like this. Okay? Okay, it will look something like this. Okay, can you see it cuts the line two times over here? So this one over here, that's gonna be negative 7, and this one over here, that's gonna be negative 3. All right, and if I want to find x-intercept, my y-axis is always 0. That is why there are two values over here, all right, for x that satisfy this equation. All right, okay, so I hope that clarifies it. Why are there two values over here? Because when we look at this, eventually, we know there's a graph. And to find x-intercept, we are interested to find x-intercept, that's the x-axis over here. We must make y is equals to 0. So we can know where does the line cuts through the x-axis over here. Okay? So, all right. So, of course, for your level now for this, you don't have to translate this into graph, but of course, eventually you will. All right. But for now, your level is to able to factorize all these quadratic equations, okay, and to find the value of x over here. All right. You can either factorize it in difference of square or using quadratic equation, and then all you need to do is to take the first bracket equals to 0. All right, because you know over here the y-axis is always equal to 0. Over here the y-axis always equal to 0. That's why I can write like this. Okay, and then all you need to do is your basic algebra. Just move it over, and you will get your x-axis value. And this is true for any quadratic equation. Okay, so that's all. I hope you can try out the exercise, and you should be fine with this. Okay, thank you.